Lights were rolling, tempers were flaring, and nobody was ready for what happened next. What was supposed to be just another routine day on set suddenly exploded into full-blown chaos when a long-simmering family feud crossed a line no one saw coming. Fans are shocked, crew members were left frozen in place, and by the end of it all, one question echoed louder than anything else: how did it get this bad? Sources whisper that tensions had been building for weeks. Side eyes, closed-door arguments, awkward silences that said more than words ever could. Then, in a moment that would instantly ripple through the entire cast, Rasheeda's mother allegedly stepped in, not with words but with action. A heated exchange turned physical, and before anyone could break it up, Kirk was hit in front of cameras, family, and stunned onlookers. But the most chilling part? Rasheeda said nothing. As emotions ran high and voices overlapped in disbelief, all eyes turned to her. Would she defend her husband? Would she confront her mother? Or would her silence say more than any argument ever could? That quiet moment, heavy and loaded, sent shockwaves through everyone watching. Fans are already calling it the most uncomfortable scene they've ever imagined, a moment where love, loyalty, and betrayal collided in real time. The family was left divided, the set thrown into turmoil, and whispers of, "This changes everything," spread like wildfire. Was this about old wounds reopening? Unforgivable betrayals finally boiling over? Or a breaking point that had been inevitable all along? One thing is certain. Once that line was crossed, there was no going back, and the fallout was only just beginning. The atmosphere on set was already thick before anyone raised their voice, the kind of tension you can feel crawling up your spine even when nothing is being said. Cameras were rolling, lights were hot, and every cast member could sense that something was off. Rasheeda sat quietly in her chair, adjusting her mic, her face calm but distant, while Kirk paced a few steps away, jaw tight, phone clenched in his hand like it was the last thing keeping him grounded. Fans would later say this was the moment everything shifted, even before the chaos actually exploded. Whispers from crew members hinted that an argument had happened earlier off camera, something about money, respect, and old wounds that never truly healed. Rasheeda's mom stood nearby, arms crossed, watching Kirk with eyes that carried years of resentment, the kind that doesn't fade with apologies or time. Emotions ran high, but no one expected what was coming next. When filming officially began, the producer tried to steer the conversation towards something light, something manageable, but Kirk couldn't let it go. His voice rose, sharp and defensive, as he brought up feeling disrespected in his own marriage. He looked straight at Rasheeda while saying it, waiting for her to jump in, to defend him, to say something, anything. But Rasheeda said nothing. The silence was loud, almost painful, and fans would later say that moment hurt more than any argument. Kirk laughed bitterly and turned his attention toward her mother, muttering under his breath about outside opinions and people who never liked him anyway. That was when Rasheeda's mom stepped forward, her voice steady but trembling with emotion. She reminded Kirk of every tear her daughter had cried, every time she picked up the pieces while he walked away. The family was left divided right there in the room, and the crew exchanged nervous glances, unsure if they should cut the cameras or let it all play out. Kirk snapped back, accusing her of poisoning Rasheeda against him, claiming she never wanted their marriage to work. His words were harsh, calculated, and meant to sting. Fans are shocked at how far he went, pointing fingers and bringing up private moments that were never meant to be aired out. Rasheeda's mom warned him to watch his mouth, her voice rising now, the restraint she'd held onto for years finally slipping. Rasheeda shifted in her seat, eyes lowered, hands folded tightly in her lap. She still didn't speak. That silence became its own character in the room, haunting everyone watching. Kirk took another step closer, invading Rasheeda's mom's space, and that's when everything broke. In a split second that would be replayed in fans' minds over and over, Rasheeda's mom raised her hand and struck Kirk across the side of his face. The sound echoed through the set, a sharp crack that stopped time. Crew members gasped, someone yelled cut, but it was too late. Kirk stumbled back, shock written all over his face, his hand flying up to his cheek. Emotions ran high as voices erupted from every direction. Some rushed toward Kirk, others tried to hold Rasheeda's mom back, but she was already shouting, years of pain pouring out in raw, unfiltered words. She told him she was done watching her daughter suffer, done biting her tongue while he played victim. Fans would later say they felt that anger through the screen, even knowing it was chaos no one wanted to see. Through all of this, Rasheeda remained silent. She stood up slowly, her expression unreadable, and that silence cut deeper than the slap ever could. Kirk looked at her, eyes wide, clearly expecting her to react, to take his side, to say her mom had gone too far. But Rasheeda said nothing. The room felt frozen, the family left divided in a way that couldn't be ignored anymore. Producers debated whether to shut everything down, but the damage was already done. Kirk finally broke the quiet, his voice shaking as he asked, "You really not gonna say nothing? Rasheeda looked at him for a long moment, then looked away, and that single movement sent shockwaves through everyone watching. Fans are shocked not just by the physical moment but by what followed. Kirk accused Rasheeda of choosing her mother over her marriage, of humiliating him on camera. Rasheeda's mom fired back, saying Kirk humiliated himself long before cameras ever showed up. The argument spiraled, accusations flying about trust, loyalty, and sacrifices that went unnoticed. Rasheeda's silence became the loudest response in the room, forcing everyone to confront what it really meant. Some cast members tried to step in, urging calm, reminding them that this was family, but the words felt empty in the face of so much unresolved pain. As security finally separated everyone, Kirk sat alone, rubbing his face, his anger slowly turning into something else, something closer to fear. He realized this wasn't just about a slap or an argument. This was about losing control of the narrative he thought he had. Rasheeda's mom was escorted away, still visibly shaken but unapologetic. She told anyone who would listen that she'd do it again if it meant protecting her daughter. Rasheeda stood in the middle of the room, eyes glassy now, but still silent, as if speaking would open a flood she wasn't ready to face. Fans would later debate whether her silence was strength, shock, or the sign of someone finally reaching their breaking point. When filming paused, the crew buzzed with whispers. Some said this was the end of Rasheeda and Kirk as fans knew them. Others believed this confrontation had been building for years and was bound to explode sooner or later. Emotions ran high long after the cameras stopped, and the family was left divided not just on set but in real life too. Kirk reportedly demanded an apology, while Rasheeda's mom refused, saying respect had to come first. Rasheeda remained caught in the middle, her silence now the center of every conversation, leaving everyone wondering what she would do next and whether this moment had permanently changed everything. After the dust settled and the cameras went dark, the tension didn't leave the room, it just changed shape. It hung heavier, quieter, more dangerous. Kirk stayed seated, staring at the floor like he was replaying the moment over and over, trying to figure out how everything spun out of control so fast. Rasheeda leaned against a table nearby, arms crossed now, her silence no longer calm but strained, like a wire pulled too tight. Crew members pretended to adjust equipment just to stay close enough to hear, because everyone knew this wasn't over. Fans are shocked when they later learn that the real drama didn't happen during the slap, but in the moments right after, when emotions ran high and no one was performing anymore. Kirk finally stood up and walked toward Rasheeda, his voice low but sharp, asking why she let it happen, why she didn't stop her mother, why she didn't defend him. Every question landed like an accusation. Rasheeda looked at him, eyes glossy but steady, and for a second it seemed like she might finally speak. The room leaned in, but instead of words, she took a step back. That movement alone told a story Kirk wasn't ready to hear. He scoffed, shaking his head, muttering about betrayal and disrespect, saying he felt ambushed, set up, humiliated. Rasheeda's silence felt louder now, almost deliberate, and that's when Kirk's frustration turned into anger again. He raised his voice, saying everyone saw what happened, saying the world would judge him without knowing the full story. He accused Rasheeda's mom of waiting for the perfect moment to embarrass him and accused Rasheeda of letting it happen. Emotions ran high as cast members tried to step between them, urging Kirk to calm down, reminding him that things had gone too far already. Rasheeda finally lifted her hand slightly, not to gesture, but almost like she was asking for space. Kirk stopped talking, stunned. Fans would later say this was the first time they saw Kirk truly unsure of himself. Meanwhile, Rasheeda's mom was in another room, pacing back and forth, her anger slowly giving way to exhaustion. She told a producer that she'd held her tongue for years, watched her daughter cry in private while smiling in public, and she wasn't about to apologize for protecting her child. Her voice cracked as she spoke, revealing the pain beneath the rage. Fans are shocked when they hear that she admitted she knew cameras were there and didn't care anymore. To her, the line had already been crossed long before that slap. The family was left divided not just by the incident but by years of unresolved hurt that finally had nowhere left to hide. Back on set, Rasheeda sat down alone, staring at nothing, as whispers floated around her. Some cast members felt she should have spoken up, others understood why she didn't. Emotions ran high as opinions clashed, and it became clear that everyone was choosing sides, even if they pretended not to. Rasheeda's silence was being interpreted in 1,000 different ways, and none of them felt fair. Kirk watched from across the room, his expression shifting between anger and fear, realizing that the narrative was no longer in his control. Hours later, when filming resumed, the energy was completely different. No one joked, no one laughed. The slap might have been the headline, but the silence was the real story. Kirk tried to explain himself on camera, saying he felt attacked and disrespected, saying he never meant for things to get physical. His voice wavered, and fans are shocked by how vulnerable he sounded compared to earlier. Rasheeda listened, eyes fixed on the floor, her face unreadable. When asked for her thoughts, she paused for a long moment and the room held its breath. But again, she said nothing. That decision sent another wave of shock through everyone watching. Off camera, social media was already exploding. Fans picked apart every clip, every facial expression, every pause. Some praised Rasheeda's mom for standing up for her daughter, calling her brave and overdue. Others criticized the violence, saying it crossed a line no matter the reason. Kirk's supporters argued he was provoked and unfairly targeted. Rasheeda's silence became the center of endless debates, with fans projecting their own experiences onto her quiet. Emotions ran high online, and the family was left divided in the court of public opinion as much as on set. The next day, Kirk tried again to talk to Rasheeda privately. He apologized for yelling, for escalating things, but stopped short of taking full responsibility. He wanted understanding without accountability. Rasheeda listened, arms folded, her expression tired. When he finished, she finally spoke, her voice soft but firm, saying she needed time. That was it. No reassurance, no defense, no promises. Fans are shocked when they hear this was the first thing she said since the incident. Kirk looked stunned, as if he expected forgiveness just for saying sorry. Rasheeda walked away, leaving him standing there, realizing how fragile everything had become. Rasheeda later met with her mom, the two sitting across from each other in a quiet room. Her mom apologized for putting her in that position, admitting she acted out of anger. Rasheeda nodded, tears finally spilling over, saying she didn't know how to choose between protecting her marriage and protecting herself. That moment revealed the real cost of the chaos. Fans would later say this conversation changed how they saw everything. It wasn't about sides anymore, it was about survival. Emotions ran high as Rasheeda admitted she'd been silent because she was tired of explaining, tired of defending, tired of carrying everyone else's emotions. As filming continued, the cast sensed a shift. Kirk was more subdued, less confrontational. Rasheeda was distant, present but emotionally checked out. Rasheeda's mom kept her distance, but her presence still loomed over every interaction. The family was left divided, and no one knew if it could be repaired. Producers whispered about whether this was the beginning of the end or just another chapter in a long, messy story. Fans are shocked by how raw everything feels, even knowing it's playing out on screen. By the end of the week, it was clear that the slap was only the spark, not the fire. The real drama was in what followed, in the quiet moments, the unanswered questions, the relationships hanging by a thread. Kirk started to realize that being hit hurt less than being ignored. Rasheeda started to realize that silence could be both a shield and a weapon. And Rasheeda's mom stood firm in her belief that protecting her child mattered more than public perception. Emotions ran high as everyone braced themselves for what was coming next, knowing that once things reached this point, there was no easy way back. The days that followed felt heavier than the chaos itself, like everyone was walking through the aftermath of an emotional earthquake. Conversations were quieter, glances lasted longer, and every silence carried meaning. Kirk tried to reclaim some sense of normal, cracking forced jokes with the crew, but nobody laughed the same way anymore. Fans are shocked when behind-the-scenes whispers reveal that even the producers didn't know how to move forward. The storyline they thought they were capturing had turned into something raw and uncontrollable, something that couldn't be edited into a neat narrative. Rasheeda moved through the set like a ghost, present in body but far away in spirit, her silence now a wall no one knew how to climb. Kirk began to feel the shift in how people treated him. Cast members who once backed him openly now kept their distance, choosing their words carefully. He overheard conversations stop when he walked into a room, saw phones being lowered too quickly. Emotions ran high as paranoia crept in, and he started to feel like everyone had already made up their minds about him. He confronted one of the cast, demanding to know what people were saying, but the response was vague, noncommittal, which somehow hurt more than open criticism. The family was left divided, and Kirk was realizing that division didn't just live inside his marriage, it had spread everywhere. Rasheeda, meanwhile, found herself surrounded by concern that felt suffocating. People kept asking if she was okay, if she wanted to talk, if she needed anything. Each question felt like pressure, like another expectation she couldn't meet. Fans are shocked when it's revealed that Rasheeda asked producers to stop asking her to comment on the incident. She wasn't ready to explain herself, and the more she was pushed, the quieter she became. Her silence wasn't about punishment or strategy, it was about self-preservation. Emotions ran high inside her, but she had learned that sometimes speaking only made things worse. One evening, after filming wrapped early, Kirk found Rasheeda sitting alone in the parking lot, staring out of her car window without turning the engine on. He knocked lightly on the glass, unsure if she'd even acknowledge him. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were tired in a way that scared him more than anger ever could. He apologized again, this time softer, saying he hated how things looked, how people were judging him, how he felt like he was losing everything. Rasheeda listened, her face calm, but when he finished, she asked a question that changed the entire conversation. She asked why everything always came back to how he felt. Kirk froze. Fans would later say this was the moment the power dynamic truly shifted. Rasheeda explained, quietly but firmly, that she had spent years absorbing pain in silence, cleaning up messes she didn't make, and smiling through public humiliation. She said her mother's actions embarrassed her, but they didn't surprise her. What surprised her was Kirk's expectation that she would immediately defend him without acknowledging her own hurt. Emotions ran high as Kirk struggled to respond. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but something in her tone told him this wasn't a fight he could win by being louder. The family was left divided not just by the slap but by this realization that Rasheeda had been carrying far more than anyone knew. News of the continued tension leaked, and fans are shocked by how polarized reactions became. Some praised Rasheeda for finally centering herself, calling her silence powerful. Others accused her of being passive, of letting chaos happen without stepping in. Rasheeda's mom became a symbol to many, either of fierce protection or unacceptable behavior, depending on who you asked. Kirk found himself painted as the villain in narratives he felt were incomplete, while Rasheeda was framed as both victim and enigma. Emotions ran high online, with debates spilling into every comment section, every livestream, every fan page. Behind closed doors, Rasheeda's mom struggled with her own guilt. She replayed the moment in her head, wondering if she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She reached out to Rasheeda, not to justify herself, but to ask if she'd caused more harm than help. Rasheeda admitted she didn't know the answer yet. That honesty hurt, but it was real. The family was left divided in a way that forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths. Protection, love, and control had blurred together, and no one was sure where one ended and the other began. Kirk attempted damage control, sitting down for conversations meant to clear his name. He spoke about feeling disrespected, about being under attack, about how the incident didn't define who he was. But fans are shocked at how flat it all felt compared to the rawness of Rasheeda's silence. Words, it seemed, had lost their power. Emotions ran high as Kirk realized that talking his way out of this wasn't working. The more he spoke, the more people listened for what he wasn't saying. As filming neared a critical point, producers pushed for a group conversation, hoping to capture some form of resolution. Rasheeda agreed to show up but made it clear she wouldn't be forced into anything. When everyone sat down, the air was thick again, but different from before. It wasn't explosive, it was fragile. Kirk apologized to Rasheeda's mom for his words, though his pride made it difficult. She accepted the apology without backing down from her reasons. Rasheeda watched it all, her face unreadable. Fans are shocked when she finally spoke, not loudly, not emotionally, but clearly. She said she was tired of chaos being normalized as passion and tired of silence being mistaken for weakness. That statement shifted everything. Emotions ran high as the room processed her words. Kirk looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, realizing that her quiet had been a choice, not a failure. Rasheeda's mom wiped away tears, understanding that protection also meant trusting her daughter to find her own voice. The family was left divided still, but now the lines were clearer, the wounds named. Even after that conversation, nothing magically healed. Trust doesn't rebuild itself overnight, and pain doesn't disappear just because it's acknowledged. Rasheeda remained cautious, Kirk remained uncertain, and her mom remained watchful. Fans are shocked by how unresolved everything felt, but that was the reality. Emotions ran high because this wasn't a scripted ending, it was a pause, a breath before the next decision. As the season continued, viewers watched every interaction closely, searching for signs. A look held too long, a touch avoided, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. The family was left divided, but also more honest than they'd ever been. Kirk learned that being hid was nothing compared to being forced to listen. Rasheeda learned that silence could protect her, but speaking when she was ready could change everything. And Rasheeda's mom learned that love sometimes meant stepping back instead of stepping in. Fans are shocked not by what happened next, but by how real it all felt, because the chaos wasn't just about one slap, it was about years of unspoken pain finally demanding to be heard. Time kept moving, but nothing felt settled. Every interaction carried the weight of what had already happened, like the past was sitting in the room with them, listening. Kirk tried to show up differently, softer, more careful, but old habits don't disappear just because the spotlight changes. Rasheeda noticed everything, the pauses before he spoke, the way he watched her face for approval, the tension in his shoulders when her mom entered the room. Fans are shocked when insiders reveal that even small moments felt charged, like a single wrong word could reopen everything. Emotions ran high because no one trusted that peace would last. Rasheeda began spending more time alone, not out of bitterness but clarity. She needed space to hear her own thoughts without everyone else's expectations filling the silence. That silence became intentional now, a boundary instead of a reaction. Kirk mistook it for distance at first, assuming she was pulling away to punish him. But the truth was deeper. Rasheeda was finally asking herself questions she had avoided for years. What did she actually want? What did respect look like to her? What kind of example was she setting by staying quiet or speaking up? The family was left divided because these questions didn't have easy answers. Kirk struggled with feeling exposed. For the first time, he wasn't controlling the story. Fans are shocked when clips surface showing him trying to rehearse what he would say on camera, only to stop midway, frustrated. He realized that every explanation sounded like an excuse. Emotions ran high as he confronted the uncomfortable truth that accountability required more listening than talking. Still, pride doesn't disappear overnight. He wrestled with the fear that admitting too much would make him look weak, even though the opposite was already happening. Rasheeda's mom watched all of this closely, quieter than before, her energy shifted. She no longer hovered or jumped in. Instead, she observed, letting her daughter take the lead. Fans are shocked by this change, but it came from reflection. She knew her actions had consequences, even if her intentions were rooted in love. The family was left divided, but there was a new respect forming, one that allowed space instead of control. She told Rasheeda she trusted her to handle things her way, even if that way was slower and quieter than people expected. One night, after a long day of filming, Rasheeda finally broke down. Not on camera, not in front of anyone, but alone. Years of holding it together cracked open, and with it came relief and fear. She cried for the woman she used to be, the compromises she made, the battles she fought silently. Emotions ran high as she admitted to herself that staying silent had sometimes been easier than risking change. That realization didn't come with immediate answers, but it gave her direction. The next time she spoke to Kirk, it was different. There was no yelling, no accusations. She told him plainly that things couldn't go back to how they were. Not after everything. Kirk listened, really listened, and for once didn't interrupt. Fans are shocked when he admits he didn't realize how much she'd been carrying. It wasn't a dramatic apology or a grand gesture, but it was honest. The family was left divided still, but there was a crack in the wall, a place where something new could grow if both sides were willing. Public reaction continued to pour in. Fans dissected every moment, every word, every silence. Some wanted a clear villain, others wanted a clear ending. But what they got was complexity. Emotions ran high because people saw pieces of themselves in the story. Relationships aren't clean, and neither was this. Rasheeda became a symbol of quiet strength to some, frustration to others. Kirk became a cautionary tale for some, misunderstood for others. Rasheeda's mom remained polarizing, a reminder that love can both protect and harm. As filming moved toward another pivotal scene, producers sensed something different. The chaos that once fueled the drama had transformed into tension rooted in truth. When the family came together again, there was no explosion. Instead, there was honesty. Rasheeda spoke about boundaries, about needing actions to match words. Kirk acknowledged his patterns without deflecting. Rasheeda's mom apologized again, this time without justification. Emotions ran high because vulnerability replaced defensiveness, and that shift was more powerful than any shouting match. Still, resolution didn't mean reunion. Rasheeda made it clear that trust would take time, and time didn't guarantee anything. Kirk accepted that uncertainty with visible discomfort, but he didn't fight it. Fans are shocked when he says he's willing to do the work without knowing the outcome. That admission didn't fix everything, but it changed the tone. The family was left divided, but no longer in denial about why. As weeks passed, small changes became noticeable. Kirk checked in instead of assuming. Rasheeda spoke up when something didn't sit right. Her mom stayed supportive without stepping over the line. Emotions ran high in quieter ways now, in moments of restraint instead of reaction. Fans who expected another explosion were surprised to see restraint become the new drama. But not everyone believed the shift was permanent. Doubts lingered, both on screen and off. Could habits that formed over years really change? Could silence turn into voice without backlash? Could protection turn into trust? The family was left divided not by anger anymore, but by uncertainty. And uncertainty can be just as heavy. Toward the end of the arc, Rasheeda addressed the situation publicly for the first time on her own terms. She spoke about growth, about choosing peace over performance, about learning when to speak and when to step back. Fans are shocked by her calm confidence, by the absence of bitterness. She didn't excuse what happened, but she didn't dwell in it either. Emotions ran high because her words felt earned, not rehearsed. Kirk watched from the side, quiet. He knew this moment wasn't about him, and that might have been the biggest change of all. Rasheeda's mom watched too, proud but humbled, understanding that her role was shifting. The family was left divided still, but now division didn't mean destruction. It meant boundaries, clarity, and choice. The chaos that began with a single strike had unraveled years of silence. What replaced it wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Fans are shocked not because everything worked out, but because everyone finally stopped pretending. And in that honesty, messy and unresolved as it was, something real finally had room to exist. Even as things appeared calmer on the surface, the emotional undercurrent never fully disappeared. It shifted, it softened, but it stayed present, reminding everyone that healing is not linear. Kirk found himself walking on eggshells, unsure which version of himself Rasheeda needed on any given day. Some mornings she was open, reflective, even warm. Other days she retreated into that familiar quiet, the silence that once frustrated him but now intimidated him. Fans are shocked when insiders reveal that Kirk admitted he feared her quiet more than her anger, because at least anger meant engagement. Silence meant distance, and distance meant the possibility of loss. Rasheeda, on the other hand, felt something she hadn't felt in years: control over her own narrative. For once, she wasn't reacting, she was choosing. That realization was empowering and terrifying at the same time. Emotions ran high as she wrestled with guilt, wondering if asserting herself made her selfish, wondering if prioritizing peace meant letting go of parts of her identity she'd built around sacrifice. The family was left divided internally, not by shouting or slaps, but by competing versions of who they had been and who they were becoming. Kirk tried to prove himself through action, but consistency tested him. He made changes, small at first, then more deliberate. He listened more, interrupted less, owned mistakes without immediately justifying them. Fans are shocked when cast members quietly acknowledge that he was trying, even if they weren't sure it would last. Old patterns have gravity, and every stressful moment tempted him to fall back into defensiveness. Emotions ran high when he slipped, when his tone sharpened or his patience thinned, but now those moments didn't go unchecked. Rasheeda spoke up, calmly but firmly, and that alone changed the dynamic. Rasheeda's mom continued to redefine her role. She showed support without interference, a difficult balance she was still learning. There were moments when she wanted to step in, to shield her daughter from discomfort, but she held back. Fans are shocked when she admits that stepping back was harder than stepping in, because it forced her to confront her own fears of letting go. The family was left divided in new ways, but this division felt like growth instead of rupture. As the season moved forward, the storyline shifted from spectacle to substance. Viewers noticed the difference. The explosive chaos that once fueled conversation was replaced by quieter, heavier moments that felt more real. Emotions ran high in living rooms as fans debated whether this was redemption, transformation, or simply a pause before another storm. Some wanted fireworks, others respected the restraint. Rasheeda's silence, once criticized, was now being re-evaluated as intention. There was one moment, late in filming, that stood out to everyone involved. During a conversation meant to reflect on the past, Kirk acknowledged the slap without deflection. He didn't minimize it or justify it. He admitted that his words had contributed to an environment where anger felt inevitable. Fans are shocked by how simple the admission was, and how powerful. Rasheeda listened, not reacting immediately, letting the words sit. When she responded, she didn't offer forgiveness, but she offered honesty. She said trust was being rebuilt brick by brick, and some bricks were still missing. Emotions ran high because there was no neat ending, just truth. Off camera, the impact of everything continued to ripple. Friends and family weighed in, some supportive, some skeptical. The family was left divided in private conversations that never made it to air. Rasheeda faced questions about why she stayed, why she waited so long to speak, why she didn't leave or explode. Kirk faced questions about whether he had really changed or was just adapting to scrutiny. Rasheeda's mom faced judgment for her actions, praise from some, condemnation from others. Fans are shocked by how personal the discourse became, as if everyone involved belonged to the public now. Through it all, Rasheeda stayed grounded in one truth: she didn't owe anyone a performance. That mindset became her anchor. She spoke when she felt ready and stayed quiet when she didn't. Emotions ran high when people tried to pressure her into definitive statements, ultimatums, or declarations. She resisted, choosing nuance in a world that demanded extremes. The family was left divided between those who understood that choice and those who didn't. Kirk, slowly, began to understand that change wasn't about grand gestures. It was about repetition, showing up the same way on good days and bad days, listening even when it was uncomfortable, accepting that forgiveness, if it came, would be earned, not requested. Fans are shocked when he admits that the slap, as shocking as it was, wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was confronting years of behavior he'd normalized and realizing the cost. Rasheeda's mom found peace in seeing her daughter stand in her own strength. Even when she disagreed with her choices, she respected them. That shift healed something between them too. Emotions ran high as they talked openly about fear, about protection, about boundaries. The family was left divided less by conflict and more by individuality, each person learning to exist without controlling the others. As the chapter began to close, nothing was fully resolved, but everything was acknowledged. The chaos that once defined them no longer had the same power. Fans are shocked not because there was a fairy tale ending, but because there wasn't. Instead, there was honesty, growth, and the uncomfortable reality that some stories don't end, they evolve. Rasheeda stood in her truth, Kirk faced his reflection, and her mom learned when to hold on and when to let go. The family was left divided, but no longer broken. Emotions ran high because real change is quieter than drama, slower than outrage, and harder to sustain than a moment of chaos. And maybe that was the biggest twist of all. As the final stretch of filming approached, the weight of everything that had happened settled into something quieter but deeper. There were no more explosions, no more shouting matches that shook the room, but the emotional stakes felt higher than ever. Kirk knew that every move he made was being watched, not just by cameras or fans but by Rasheeda herself. Her reactions, or lack of them, mattered more than public opinion now. That silence had transformed again, no longer just a boundary, but a mirror, reflecting back whatever effort he put in. Emotions ran high inside him as he realized that there was no shortcut left, no clever explanation that could undo years of damage. Rasheeda felt the shift too. She noticed the way Kirk hesitated before speaking, the way he asked instead of assumed, the way he checked in instead of checking out. But she also noticed the moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, when stress made his tone sharper or his patience thinner. Instead of swallowing it like she once would have, she addressed it calmly. Sometimes he listened, sometimes he struggled, but the difference was that she no longer disappeared to keep the peace. The family was left divided between the past they were shedding and the future they were unsure how to step into. Rasheeda's mom remained present but intentionally distant from the center of things. She had learned, painfully, that love didn't always mean intervention. There were moments when she wanted to step forward, to correct, to protect, but she resisted. Fans are shocked when she later admits that stepping back felt like trusting the unknown, something she'd never been good at. Emotions ran high as she grappled with the fear that silence could be mistaken for approval, but she reminded herself that her daughter needed space to define her own strength. The public reaction continued to evolve. Early outrage had softened into curiosity, then into debate. Fans discussed growth, accountability, and whether real change was even possible under constant scrutiny. Some rooted for reconciliation, others quietly hoped Rasheeda would choose herself completely, whatever that meant. Kirk became a symbol of potential redemption to some and unresolved harm to others. Rasheeda became a symbol of restraint, her silence analyzed as carefully as any speech. The family was left divided not just by their own choices but by the projections of millions watching. One particular conversation marked a turning point that few expected. During a quiet moment, Rasheeda told Kirk she no longer wanted to relive the incident over and over. Not because it didn't matter, but because she refused to let it define every step forward. She said accountability mattered, but so did evolution. Kirk listened, nodding, understanding that this wasn't forgiveness, it was direction. Emotions ran high because letting go of constant rehashing meant facing the future without guarantees. Kirk admitted something he hadn't said out loud before. He said that being confronted by Rasheeda's mom hurt his pride, but being confronted by Rasheeda's silence hurt his ego in a way he couldn't ignore. It forced him to sit with himself instead of fighting someone else. Fans are shocked when this confession surfaces because it showed a level of self-awareness he hadn't displayed before. The family was left divided, but this honesty created a fragile bridge between them. As filming wrapped, there was no dramatic finale, no explosive reunion or tearful goodbye. Instead, there were small moments that spoke louder than any argument. Kirk holding space instead of filling it. Rasheeda choosing when to speak and when to pause. Her mom offering support without instruction. Emotions ran high because this quiet ending felt more real than anything that came before it. The chaos that once defined their story had given way to complexity. Off camera, life continued. The cameras leaving didn't magically fix anything, but they removed the pressure to perform. Rasheeda embraced that freedom, focusing on herself in ways she hadn't allowed before. She leaned into her own voice, discovering that it didn't need to be loud to be firm. Kirk continued working on consistency, learning that effort wasn't something you announced, it was something you repeated. Rasheeda's mom focused on healing her own reactions, understanding that love could be fierce without being explosive. Fans are shocked when updates suggest that the family didn't rush into declarations or decisions. There were no rushed resolutions, no neat labels. The family was left divided in a way that allowed individuality instead of conflict. Emotions ran high because this uncertainty felt honest, even uncomfortable. Not every story ends with closure, and that truth resonated more deeply than any scripted ending could have. Looking back, the moment that started it all seemed almost unreal. A slap on set had cracked open years of silence, exposing truths no one was ready to face. But what followed mattered more than the impact itself. Rasheeda's silence became a catalyst instead of a weakness. Kirk's defensiveness became reflection. Her mom's protection became trust. The family was left divided but also transformed. In the end, there were no winners and no villains, just people forced to confront themselves under an unforgiving spotlight. Emotions ran high because growth is messy, uneven, and rarely linear. Fans may never agree on who was right or wrong, but one thing became clear. The real drama wasn't the chaos everyone saw, it was the quiet work that followed, the choices made when no one was clapping, and the courage it took to change without knowing how the story would be received. Even after everything that had unfolded, the emotional residue refused to fade. It lingered in the smallest interactions, the glances exchanged, the pauses before responding. Rasheeda felt different now, not lighter exactly, but clearer. Clarity, she learned, doesn't always bring comfort. Sometimes it brings hard decisions. Kirk sensed that shift and it unsettled him. He could feel that she was no longer anchored by fear of conflict or obligation. She was anchored by self-awareness, and that changed the balance completely. Emotions ran high because this version of Rasheeda couldn't be guided, rushed, or guilted. Kirk began to confront the possibility that effort alone might not be enough. Change didn't guarantee outcome. That realization shook him. For years, he believed fixing behavior would automatically fix the relationship. Now he understood that repair required consent from both sides, not just intention. Fans are shocked when insiders say Kirk privately admitted he was afraid of losing Rasheeda not because of one incident, but because she finally saw herself clearly. The family was left divided by this truth, because clarity can be liberating for one person and terrifying for another. Rasheeda started setting boundaries that felt small but carried weight. She declined certain conversations when she felt emotionally drained. She asked for space without apology. She stopped smoothing over tension for the sake of peace. Each boundary was a statement, not of anger, but of value. Emotions ran high as people around her adjusted, some respecting it, others resisting it. Kirk struggled at first, mistaking boundaries for walls. But slowly, he realized they were invitations to show up differently. Rasheeda's mom watched with cautious pride. She saw her daughter evolving into someone who didn't need rescuing. That was both reassuring and painful. Letting go of the role of protector forced her to confront her own identity. Fans are shocked when she admits that part of her anger toward Kirk had always been rooted in fear of losing relevance in her daughter's life. The family was left divided by generational patterns that had never been spoken aloud before. As time passed, the conversation shifted from what happened to what happens next. Rasheeda didn't offer timelines or guarantees. She spoke in truths, not promises. Kirk listened, sometimes quietly, sometimes visibly uncomfortable, but he stayed. Emotions ran high because staying present without certainty is one of the hardest things to do. He wanted reassurance, something solid to hold onto, but Rasheeda refused to give what she didn't genuinely feel. That honesty, while painful, was real. Public perception continued to evolve. Fans stopped asking who was right and started asking what growth really looks like. Some felt disappointed by the lack of dramatic closure. Others felt seen by the messiness. Rasheeda's silence became a talking point again, but now it was framed as intentional restraint instead of avoidance. The family was left divided between those who demanded resolution and those who respected process. There was a moment, weeks after filming ended, when Rasheeda and Kirk had a conversation without cameras, without producers, without an audience. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, heavy, and honest. Rasheeda told him that love without safety wasn't enough anymore. Kirk didn't argue. He nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. Emotions ran high because neither of them knew where that conversation would lead, only that it mattered. Kirk began therapy, not as a performance but as a necessity. Confronting himself without a narrative to hide behind was uncomfortable. Fans are shocked when this detail leaks, not because therapy is dramatic, but because it signaled seriousness. Rasheeda didn't praise him for it, but she acknowledged it. Acknowledgement replaced applause, and that felt more meaningful. Rasheeda focused inward. She reconnected with parts of herself she'd neglected. Ambition, joy, independence. She stopped framing her needs as reactions to Kirk and started framing them as inherent. Emotions ran high as she realized how much of herself she'd muted to maintain harmony. That realization didn't come with resentment but with resolve. Rasheeda's mom continued her own reflection. She apologized again, privately, for the way her actions forced her daughter into the spotlight of conflict. Rasheeda accepted the apology without minimizing her feelings. That mutual respect healed something deep between them. The family was left divided in structure, but unified in honesty. As months passed, the intensity softened, but the impact remained. Nothing returned to how it was, and that was intentional. Kirk and Rasheeda existed in a new dynamic, one built on transparency rather than expectation. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. Emotions ran high when setbacks happened, but they were addressed instead of buried. Fans are shocked when Rasheeda later says that the slap wasn't the most defining moment. The silence that followed was. It forced everyone to sit with discomfort instead of rushing toward distraction. That discomfort became the space where growth happened. In the end, there was no grand conclusion. No dramatic declaration. No perfect reconciliation or definitive separation. Instead, there was choice. Ongoing, imperfect, intentional choice. Rasheeda chose herself without abandoning compassion. Kirk chose accountability without entitlement. Her mom chose trust over control. The family was left divided, but in a way that allowed each person to stand on their own. Emotions ran high not because of chaos anymore, but because of honesty. And sometimes, honesty is the most dramatic thing of all. As the months stretched on, the intensity of the moment transformed into something slower and more demanding. There was no adrenaline left, no shock to hide behind. Just the work. Rasheeda felt the weight of that work every day. Choosing herself didn't mean abandoning empathy, but it did mean no longer shrinking to accommodate discomfort. Kirk felt that difference in real time. Conversations no longer ended with her backing down or smoothing things over. When something hurt, she said it. When she needed space, she took it. When she didn't have the energy to explain, she didn't. That silence, once reactive, was now deliberate, and that made it powerful. Kirk struggled with patience. Growth asked more of him than apologies ever had. It asked consistency without applause. It asked humility without reward. Fans are shocked when those close to the situation say this was the hardest part for him. Changing behavior was one thing, but changing mindset was another. He had to learn that effort didn't entitle him to forgiveness or reassurance. It only entitled him to keep trying. Emotions ran high when he realized that even doing better didn't erase the past. It only built a different future, slowly. Rasheeda noticed his effort, but she didn't rush to validate it. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. She had spent too long managing everyone else's feelings. Now she was learning to sit in her own. Sometimes that meant appreciating his growth. Other times it meant acknowledging that growth didn't automatically heal everything. The family was left divided in a quieter way now, divided between hope and realism. Rasheeda's mom continued to evolve too. She found herself learning how to support without steering. It wasn't easy. Every instinct told her to intervene, to guide, to correct. But she resisted. She trusted that her daughter knew her own limits better than anyone else. Fans are shocked when she admits that stepping back taught her more about respect than stepping in ever did. Emotions ran high because letting go is its own kind of courage. There were setbacks, moments when Kirk slipped into defensiveness, moments when Rasheeda felt exhausted by the responsibility of growth, moments when old arguments tried to resurface wearing new clothes. But the difference was how those moments were handled. They didn't explode, they were addressed, paused, revisited. The family was left divided less by conflict and more by pace. Not everyone moved at the same speed, and that caused friction. Public interest never fully faded. Fans continued to speculate, to analyze, to demand answers. Some wanted a declaration of reconciliation. Others wanted a clean break. Rasheeda refused both extremes. She chose process over performance. Emotions ran high online when she declined to define the relationship for public consumption. She reminded people, gently but firmly, that real life doesn't wrap itself up neatly for an audience. Kirk faced his own reckoning with public perception. No matter what he did, there were voices that doubted him. At first, that angered him. Later, it humbled him. He realized that rebuilding trust publicly was impossible if it wasn't solid privately. Fans are shocked when he stops responding to criticism altogether, focusing instead on showing up consistently where it mattered most. That shift didn't win everyone over, but it changed him. Rasheeda experienced moments of grief she didn't expect. Grief for the version of her relationship she hoped would exist. Grief for the years she spent quiet. Grief for the simplicity she lost. Emotions ran high as she allowed herself to feel those things without rushing past them. She learned that growth includes mourning what you outgrow. The family was left divided between nostalgia and acceptance. One quiet evening, long after the cameras were gone, Rasheeda and Kirk sat together without talking. No tension, no agenda. Just presence. It was unfamiliar and strangely comforting. That moment didn't promise anything, but it showed something had shifted. Not back to how it was, but forward into something unknown. Emotions ran high because sometimes peace feels fragile when you're used to chaos. Rasheeda's mom noticed these changes from a distance. She saw her daughter standing taller, speaking clearer, choosing intentionally. That brought her relief. It also forced her to confront her own patterns, her own reactions, her own fears of being unnecessary. The family was left divided not by conflict, but by growth happening at different stages. As time passed, the incident that started it all became less of a headline and more of a reference point. Not something to relive, but something to remember. It marked the moment everything stopped being hidden. Fans are shocked when Rasheeda later says she doesn't wish it never happened. She wishes it hadn't hurt so much, but she acknowledges that it exposed truths she could no longer ignore. Emotions ran high because that honesty challenged the idea that pain is always meaningless. Kirk continued therapy, continued reflection, continued unlearning. It wasn't linear. Some weeks felt strong, others shaky. But he stayed with it. Rasheeda noticed, not with blind faith, but with cautious respect. Respect didn't mean trust had fully returned. It meant space existed for something healthier to take shape if it was earned. Rasheeda focused on herself in ways that felt new. She invested in her own joy without justification. She pursued peace without apology. She learned that her voice mattered even when it wasn't loud. Especially when it wasn't loud. That silence, now grounded, became her anchor. Emotions ran high as she realized she didn't need to be understood by everyone to be secure in herself. The family was left divided in the most honest way possible. Not broken apart, not forced together, but allowed to exist as individuals choosing how to relate to one another. That choice was ongoing, imperfect, real, and maybe that was the real aftermath of the chaos. Not the slap, not the shouting, not the shock, but the long, quiet work of becoming different. The work that doesn't trend, doesn't explode, doesn't go viral. The work that happens when no one is watching, when excuses run out, and when silence finally becomes a space for truth instead of fear. As the story continued to stretch forward, the intensity didn't disappear, it matured. What once felt like chaos slowly transformed into consequence. Every decision now had weight, not just for Rasheeda and Kirk, but for everyone around them. Friends who once joked through tension now spoke carefully. Family members who used to give advice freely now hesitated. The family was left divided not by loud conflict, but by the awareness that words could no longer be taken back once spoken. Rasheeda felt herself settling into a new rhythm. Not peace exactly, but balance. She was no longer bracing herself for emotional impact. Instead, she was choosing when and how to engage. That shift changed everything. Kirk noticed it immediately. There was no urgency in her responses anymore, no rush to fix or explain. Her silence was steady, intentional, and grounded. Emotions ran high for Kirk because he could no longer predict her reactions, and unpredictability forced him to stay present instead of relying on habit. Kirk faced moments of frustration when he realized progress didn't always feel rewarding. Sometimes it felt lonely. Sometimes it felt like walking forward without knowing if anyone was walking with him. Fans are shocked when insiders say Kirk admitted this growth felt harder than conflict ever did. Conflict gave him something to push against. Growth required patience, humility, and acceptance of uncertainty. Emotions ran high when he understood that being better didn't guarantee being chosen. Rasheeda's mom continued watching from a careful distance. She still had opinions, still felt protective instincts rise, but she checked herself. She reminded herself that trust meant allowing her daughter to make choices without interference. That restraint wasn't easy. Fans are shocked when she admits that silence, for her, was harder than confrontation. The family was left divided between old instincts and new understanding. There were moments when the past tried to resurface. Memories, triggers, habits that hadn't fully dissolved. Rasheeda felt them, acknowledged them, but didn't let them control her. Kirk felt them too, especially when stress crept in. Emotions ran high during those moments, but instead of exploding, they paused. Sometimes they stepped back. Sometimes they revisited the conversation later. That alone marked a dramatic shift from where they had been. Public curiosity never fully disappeared. People still wanted answers, still wanted a clear ending. Rasheeda resisted the pressure. She refused to define her life in soundbites. Fans are shocked when she says she doesn't owe clarity to anyone except herself. That statement resonated deeply, especially with those who saw their own struggles reflected in her journey. Emotions ran high because not everyone was ready to accept ambiguity as strength. Kirk learned to live with that ambiguity too. It challenged him. He wanted reassurance, structure, certainty. But growth required tolerance for the unknown. He learned that consistency wasn't about proving himself once, but showing up the same way over time. Fans are shocked when he stops trying to narrate his growth and simply lets it be observed. That quiet effort spoke louder than any explanation. Rasheeda experienced moments of relief mixed with sadness. Relief that she no longer felt trapped by expectation. Sadness for what had been lost along the way. Emotions ran high as she allowed herself to grieve without blaming herself or anyone else. She learned that grief didn't mean failure. It meant honesty. The family was left divided between holding on to what was familiar and accepting what was real. Rasheeda's mom found healing in seeing her daughter choose herself without anger. That calm confidence reassured her more than any argument ever could. She understood now that protection didn't always look like action. Sometimes it looked like trust. Fans are shocked when she admits that stepping back strengthened their relationship more than stepping in ever did. There came a moment when Rasheeda reflected on the incident that started everything. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. She recognized it as a breaking point, not because of the physical act, but because of what followed. The silence that filled the space afterward forced truth to surface. Emotions ran high as she realized that moment changed her permanently, not by hardening her, but by awakening her. Kirk acknowledged that too. He admitted that the aftermath hurt more than the incident itself. Being forced to confront himself without distraction, without noise, without immediate forgiveness was uncomfortable. Fans are shocked when he says that discomfort was necessary. It stripped away denial and left only responsibility. As time passed, the family dynamic continued to evolve. It wasn't perfect. Disagreements still happened, misunderstandings still occurred, but they were handled differently. With awareness instead of reaction. With intention instead of impulse. The family was left divided in a way that allowed individuality without hostility. Rasheeda continued investing in herself. Her voice became clearer, her boundaries firmer. She no longer feared being misunderstood. Emotions ran high when she realized how much energy she had spent managing perception instead of honoring truth. Letting go of that burden felt freeing. Kirk continued learning that change wasn't linear. Some days felt strong, others felt fragile, but he stayed present. He listened more than he spoke. He accepted that trust, if it returned, would do so slowly. Fans are shocked when they see him embrace patience without complaint. Rasheeda's mom continued her own growth, recognizing how generational patterns shaped her reactions. She acknowledged that love and control had once been intertwined for her. Separating the two brought peace. The family was left divided, but healthier for it. As the story moved further away from the moment of chaos, what remained was not scandal, but transformation. Fans who expected fireworks were surprised by the quiet strength that followed. Emotions ran high not because of drama, but because of depth. There was no final scene that tied everything together. No definitive ending that satisfied everyone. Instead, there was honesty. Ongoing, imperfect, intentional honesty. Rasheeda stood in her truth. Kirk accepted accountability. Her mom trusted growth. The family was left divided, but not destroyed. And maybe that was the most unexpected outcome of all. That from one moment of chaos came a long journey of self-awareness, boundaries, and choice. Not a story of instant redemption or dramatic collapse, but a story of people learning, slowly and painfully, how to be different. As the noise around the situation slowly faded, what remained was the quiet truth that none of them could escape. This wasn't just about one explosive moment anymore, it was about the long shadow it cast. Rasheeda felt that shadow most clearly when she realized how different she had become. She no longer second-guessed every feeling. She no longer apologized for needing space. The silence she carried now was rooted in certainty, not fear. Emotions ran high when she recognized that this version of herself had been waiting for years to surface. Kirk struggled with that realization in his own way. He saw the change in her posture, in her tone, in the way she no longer sought approval before speaking. Part of him admired it. Another part feared it. Fans are shocked when those close to the situation reveal that Kirk admitted feeling like he was meeting Rasheeda again for the first time. The family was left divided between familiarity and evolution, and that tension was impossible to ignore. There were moments when Kirk tried to reconnect with the old rhythm, making jokes, referencing memories, leaning into comfort. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Rasheeda didn't reject him, but she didn't regress either. Emotions ran high in those moments because nostalgia can feel like love, even when it's really just habit. She learned to tell the difference. Rasheeda's mom observed these shifts with quiet attention. She noticed how her daughter no longer looked to her for validation the way she once had. That realization was bittersweet. It meant Rasheeda was stronger, but it also meant her role was changing permanently. Fans are shocked when she admits that part of her grief wasn't about the slap or the fallout, but about realizing her daughter no longer needed her in the same way. The family was left divided by growth that didn't wait for permission. As time went on, conversations became more intentional. Rasheeda spoke less, but when she did, her words landed with weight. Kirk learned to listen without preparing a response. That shift didn't come naturally. Emotions ran high when he caught himself slipping back into old patterns, but now those moments were corrected instead of ignored. Growth wasn't dramatic, but it was consistent. Public attention lingered, though it softened. Fans moved from outrage to reflection. Many began sharing their own stories of silence, of choosing peace, of setting boundaries after years of endurance. Rasheeda's journey resonated in ways no one expected. Emotions ran high because people saw themselves in her restraint, in her refusal to perform pain for validation. The family was left divided not just by personal dynamics but by the projections of countless strangers. Kirk became more aware of how deeply his actions had rippled outward. Not just within his marriage but in how people perceived accountability, masculinity, and change. That awareness was heavy. Fans are shocked when he admits that being held accountable publicly forced him to confront things he might have otherwise ignored. The family was left divided by the reality that growth often begins where comfort ends. Rasheeda experienced a new kind of confidence. Not loud, not defiant, but steady. She no longer felt the urge to explain herself to everyone. Emotions ran high when she realized how much emotional labor she had been carrying without realizing it. Letting go of that burden felt like breathing again after holding her breath for years. Rasheeda's mom continued her own quiet healing. She reflected on her instinct to protect through confrontation and began to understand how that instinct had sometimes crossed into control. Fans are shocked when she says that learning to trust her daughter's judgment was the hardest lesson of all. The family was left divided by generational habits that took time to unlearn. There were still moments of tension. Healing didn't erase disagreement. Kirk and Rasheeda still clashed at times, still misread each other, still stumbled. But those moments no longer defined them. Emotions ran high when setbacks occurred, but they were treated as part of the process, not proof of failure. Rasheeda found herself thinking less about the incident and more about the future. Not in terms of outcomes, but in terms of alignment. She asked herself whether her life felt true to who she was becoming. That question guided her more than any opinion ever could. The family was left divided by the fact that not everyone grows at the same pace, and that reality required patience. Kirk learned to sit with discomfort without reacting. That skill changed him more than any apology ever did. Fans are shocked when he says that learning to be quiet in moments of tension taught him more than speaking ever had. The silence that once terrified him became a teacher. Rasheeda's mom noticed that too. She saw a man who was less defensive, less reactive, more reflective. She didn't rush to praise him, but she acknowledged the effort. Emotions ran high because acknowledgement without absolution felt more honest than forgiveness without change. As the months passed, the story continued without spectacle. There were no viral moments, no explosive headlines. Just people navigating change in real time. Fans who stayed invested began to understand that this was never about one dramatic act. It was about what followed when the noise stopped. Rasheeda stood firmly in her autonomy. Kirk accepted the uncertainty that came with growth. Her mom trusted the process instead of controlling it. The family was left divided, but not fractured. Each person stood on their own foundation, choosing how to connect instead of being bound by obligation. And in that quiet continuation, something unexpected emerged. Peace, not as an endpoint, but as a practice. Emotions ran high not because of chaos, but because of courage. The courage to sit in silence. The courage to change without guarantees. The courage to let a story evolve without forcing it to end. Now it's your turn to weigh in, because this story doesn't end on set and it doesn't end with silence. After everything you've heard, every tense moment, every pause that spoke louder than words, the biggest question is still hanging in the air. Was Rasheeda's silence strength or surrender? Was Kirk's effort enough or too late? And did Rasheeda's mom cross an unforgivable line, or did she finally say what everyone else was afraid to do? Fans are shocked by how divided opinions remain, and that's exactly why your voice matters here. You've seen the chaos, the fallout, and the quiet aftermath. You've watched emotions run high and relationships shift in ways no one expected. Now ask yourself, what would you have done in Rasheeda's place? Would you have spoken up sooner, or would you have chosen silence until the truth forced its way out? Would you forgive, rebuild, or walk away without looking back? This story leaves more questions than answers, and that's not an accident. The family was left divided for a reason, and the outcome is still unfolding. Some believe this is the beginning of real change. Others think it's just the calm before another storm. Either way, the next chapter depends on choices, accountability, and whether silence continues to speak louder than words. If this story made you feel something, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button to show your support, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and most importantly, drop a comment below. Tell us whose side you're on, or if you think there are no sides at all. Your perspective could spark the next conversation everyone's talking about. Stay locked in, because when silence breaks, the truth always comes out.